Welcome back, Atankana. To give you some refuge from your exceptionally busy training regimen over the last few weeks, we'll return to your favorite subject, history. In particular, the origins of the divine empire we currently find ourselves in. You know it by its common name, Sakajat, but official imperial record keepers refer to it as the diarchal authority. As we covered Vorios last time, you may think these two nations are equal in scale and complexity. They are not. The last imperial census found that the population was 26 million souls 40 years ago. That number is likely even higher now. Compare that to the roughly 3 million souls residing in Vorios, and you can understand the difference in scale. The diarchal authority is best understood as a federation, a union of 6 kingdoms as well as a few outlying territories. While you will find some number of Vorisans like me, as well as the occasional Laki, the overwhelming majority of the population is Simvite like you. The empire can be roughly split into 2 halves, the Sevasem North and the Baksamov South. The cultural differences are numerous, but they share a common history between them. If you've ever wondered why some Simvites look different than others, this is why. The southern Baksamov have brilliant golden eyes, deep brown skin, and fine bronze hair which is usually grown long. They have a love for the arts, creating some of the finest paintings, pottery, and jewelry in the world. The northern Sevasem have burning purple eyes, ruddier beige skin, and dark curly hair like that of your father. Sevasem tend to be more practical in culture, greatly valuing work and the hunt. These divisions are not stark, as marriages between these two groups are very common. You yourself have a Sevasem father and a Baksamov mother, which is why you have traits of both. There is one major group of Simvites, who you have not yet seen. The Mozam live far to the north, past the mountains. They are Simvites with a muted orange complexion, striking cyan eyes, and ashen black hair. As I tell you the tale of the empire's founding, you will learn why the Mozam are not in this empire. The holy tradition of your people, the Bakadanasatov, recounts the earliest history of the Simvites. After subduing the primordial darkness, our Lord Damacha constructed himself a great spherical throne. This great throne is the sun, and the light emitted from it is the Lord's own radiance. He saw that the blood he shed in contest with the Great Nothing had taken form as life, flora, fauna, and primitive humans. Lord Damacha looked upon these first people with pity and adopted them as his own. He created 4 angels to watch over them, each representing one of the 4 great hues. We will discuss the angels more in the future, and I am quite sure you've heard and seen much about them already. You just need to understand the basics for the purposes of this history. Bakanurtha is the yellow angel of soul. She was sculpted of music and painted with the contrasting hues of love and hatred. She soothes those in distress and brings guilt to those in sin. Drevanatha is the purple angel of will. It is action incarnate, endlessly moving. It guides the wild hunt and the warrior alike. Mozanatha is the blue angel of mind, who appears as an old man with a knowing and forlorn countenance. Finally, Batanurtha is the angel of body. Batanurtha rarely appears in human form, as they stay close to the bosom of the Lord. They built the unshakable tower the sun's throne rests upon, and will play an important role in the history of Sakajat. The world continued according to the plans of Lord Damacha for thousands of years. He appointed kings to rule over mankind, and would reward or punish nations according to their goodliness. His plans were interrupted when King Onea of Vorios caused the Great Gloaming, plunging the world into darkness for decades. In the absence of God, the nobility forgot their righteousness and became unjust. They paved the way for their own destruction, which allowed for vicious and vile men to take control over your lands. Remember this lesson, young prince, for to forget the light is to willingly place your head upon the executioner's block. Only a small order of nuns, the Jatmachaj, remembered Damacha and his commands. As Lord Damacha was reconstituting inside of the sun, a foreign power saw the chaos in Sakajat. The Laki, an ancient people who live in the deadlands outside of the sun's light, saw a chance to expand. You will have seen the Laki before. They are the towering people with deep purple skin. Their history is as long and complex as your own, but for now it suffices to understand the bare minimum. They are incredibly long-lived, often surviving well into their 4th century below the sun. Throughout these extended lives, they continuously grow, often reaching 10 feet or more by the end of their life. They are hardened by the wind-swept and freezing lands far from the sun's rays, but because their resources are limited, their numbers are few. They make up for their rarity with might and wisdom. I will describe their great and continuing conflict with your people. But young prince, I ask that you remember they were born from the same light as you. Your people have been pitted against theirs by the turning of fate, but do not harbor hate for them. Hate is like a hunter. It will seek to confound and trap you so that it may butcher and devour you. For the first eons of their existence, the Laki separated into diverse clans which fought over the Deadlands. With the first gloaming, their native cold encroached onto the formerly temperate lands. 3 of the largest Laki clans, the tactical and philosophical geniuses of the Dalam, the agriculturally inclined and wise Elan, and the nomadic spirit-worshipping Langat, saw an opportunity for peace between their people. They believed if they could turn their spears to new lands, Sakajat, they could cease to fight among each other. This alliance was organized by Ansa Anal, the ingenious Dalam queen. She swept over most of the continent with ease, pushing the fragmentary Simvite warlord states back to the southeastern reaches of the continent. It had been 100 years since the treachery of Onea brought on the gloaming, and Damacha was beginning to remanifest within the solar throne. He saw the danger the Simvite were in and decided that they had suffered enough for the evil of their leadership. It was time to appoint a new noble line, starting with a new leader, to unite the continent. One of the warlords, though imperfect, had shown his people more generosity and love than any other. Though he had learned his ways from evil and usurping predecessors, there was a goodness deep within him that was evident to all. The Lord saw fit to adopt him as his own. He is known to history as the Son of Sun, the first emperor of Sakajat. Under his leadership, the desperate warlord bands were able to unite enough to push back the Laki invasion. Still, his tactics involved cruelty inflicted on his enemies and his own. The Jatmachaj nuns, who had preserved the sacred teachings, bravely opposed his worst tendencies, particularly an outstanding prophetess named Sasakal. The debates between her and the emperor are recorded in the Dialogues of Sasakal, a crucial episode in the development of modern moral philosophy and literature. In the end, the nun and emperor saw fit to wed. At that moment, the diarchy began. To this day, Sakajat is ruled by a dual throne, a man and a woman, drawn from a universally appreciated union involving a descendant of these two. Through the course of the war, they had two children, Bakdanascha and Nalcha. Bakdanascha was unmatched in his elegance, blessed by Damacha with beauty and charm. Nalcha had neither such blessing, but took after her mother's talents as a writer and philosopher. It is at this point that the angels became involved in the affairs of the new empire. Bak and Streve, the angels of soul and will, both found themselves drawn to Bakdanascha. They appeared to the king and queen, demanding they choose who would be allowed to wed him. For reasons oft debated, they granted Bak the honor. To appease Streve, it was instead wed to their daughter, Nalcha. Each line had 3 children, the warrior princes of Sakajat. These children eventually became the first rulers of the 6 kingdoms of Sakajat. The southern kingdoms were gifted to the children of Bak, and the northern kingdoms to the children of Streve. So the northern Sevasem Simvites have traces of Streve's lineage, and the Baksamov have traces of Bak's. But these were not to be the only grandchildren of the first diarchs. Nalcha became displeased with Streve. Her ever-expanding intellect was left unsated. It was around this time that Mose, the angel of mind, returned from his 2,401 years in exile. He had betrayed Damacha in an event too tangential to approach here. Upon awakening, he saw that his siblings had become involved in the affairs of Sakajat and investigated the royal family. Nalcha was keen enough to discover him, and the two began an affair. From this affair, a final child was conceived, kobakode. After this was brought to light, the pregnant Nalcha was banished to the mountains for the violation of her wedding vows. The emperor and empress knew that to do anything else would be to draw the eternal rage of Streve. However, they had not lost love for their daughter. The Empress Saskal informed her daughter of a sect of monks living in the mountains between the two warring factions. Nalcha and her newly born son would take refuge with them, learning the ways of these mendicants. The banishment of Nalcha was a key moment in the history of Sakajat, leaving your people to be highly skeptical of overly intellectual pursuits. This distrust of Mose and his ways is why alchemy is banned in Sakajat, and why writing is highly limited. The final angel of this story, Bet, is responsible for maintaining vows such as marriage. Bet saw the rifts created between the imperial family by the intervention of their siblings, and made one of their rare trips away from the solar throne to resolve it. The might of Bet is unmatched by the other angels, and with their strong arm, these wayward siblings were forced to never again mingle with human affairs. For the first time since they were created, all 4 angels returned together to God's throne. Back on the continent, the war continued for many years. The angelic princelings grew in talent and prestige, with the 6 legitimate heirs being trained to continue the offensive their father began. The final and illegitimate child, kobakode, had the noetic genius of Mose within him. He quickly unified many of the monks of the mountains, creating a monastic order which most modern orders descend from. These monks were made up of both Simvite and Laki, bridging an otherwise unshakable divide. Kobakode saw this potential, and believed he could use it to end the fighting between these two peoples. Whether he wished to do this out of genuine compassion, or out of ego, or both, will never be known. In any case, he secretly met with the Laki queen Ansa Anal, and put forth his plan. He would reveal his secret heritage to the world and marry her, hoping to cement a royal union between the Simvites and Laki. Despite it initially being a marriage of convenience, Kobakode and Ansa Anal discovered many commonalities between them, including a reverence for Mose and his sciences. Kobakode had a love for monastic techniques and alchemy, while Ansa Anal had a brilliant tactical mind. But rather than making peace, this union only created more strife. While it did successfully convince the occupied Simvites in the north to join this new alliance as soldiers, the other Laki clans understood the queen's true intention and immediately declared war on this new Mozam Dalam alliance. The warrior princes, not knowing Kobakode's true origins, assumed him to be a false claimant and completely rejected his plot. This enraged Kobakode, who never forgave his siblings for their rejection. Now believing that only superior force could bring peace to the continent, he used his alchemical knowledge to produce steel. Ansa Anal was able to provide the logistics for the mass extraction of the required resources. This began the Iron Age, and gave their soldiers an advantage over the bronze-wielding Sakajat soldiers. There was now a three-way war between the Laki Alliance, Mozam Dalam Empire, and the new, rapidly expanding Sakajat Empire. The Dalam Queen and Kobakode were both excellent tacticians, and were able to deftly handle both fronts. The less war-inclined Ilan and Langat Laki were quickly pushed out, leaving only these two claimants to the Son of Sun's empire at war. The Laki Queen Ansa Anal had trained an unbeatable soldier, the legendary Nudwell. No person throughout history could be said to approach the brutality or cunning of this warrior. He slew countless Simvites, and his forces eventually reached the stronghold of the empire. Here he slew the aged Son of Sun and his beautiful son Baktanacha. In her final moments, Saskal admitted the truth to her children. Kobakode truly was their kin. After this final show of honesty and virtue, she arranged for the six to escape, and so she too was slain by the unquenchable Nudwell. The six warrior princes took up arms and gathered armies, preparing to launch a counterattack against the Mozam Dalam Empire. They each took up a different territory to manage and defend, these territories becoming the six kingdoms we see today. Throughout the war, each of the six warrior princes sustained a great injury. We do not have time to recount the details of each holy maiming here, but each was left with a missing part of their body. Dreve and Bach were devastated to see their children so destroyed, and begged Bet to allow them to intervene. Bet refused, but compromised with the other angels. They crafted 6 replacements for the missing body parts, which came to be known as the Vital Crowns. Wrought of pure red essence, they were greater than what had been lost. They were delivered to the princes and taken unto their bodies. These Vital Crowns are the very same passed down by the kings of each kingdom to this day. This is why ascension to the throne requires a maiming, the loss of one's original body part, to obtain their birthright. You know well that this will one day be your fate too, Atankana. You will obtain the royal heart of your father and inherit your kingdom alongside it. Do not fear this, for you will be granted the indelible might of Bet. While the Mozam Dalam had the advantage of steel, they lacked a sufficient population to overpower Sakajat. This, combined with instability in the north from contests for the centralized throne after the death of Ansa Anal and Kobakode, turned the tide of the war, until they were locked in perpetual conflict over the central mountains. To this day, over 1,000 years later, peace has still not been signed between the two empires. As a result, the war of the Dalam and Kobakode's people against your people has been called the Millennium War, though it should be noted that the conflict is usually inactive, as each side has found the other nearly impossible to penetrate. The war flares from century to century, escalating and de-escalating endlessly. It has shaped the bones of these two empires. Still, perhaps a king like you could one day bring peace between these estranged cousins. Of course, this is only the founding of the empire. There is far more to discuss, but I am afraid we have other topics that we must attend to.